907, female caller states she is pregnant. 103rd floor, 30 people, lots of smoke.
But the whole time I was thinking about my friends who I knew were in the building. My concern was if they were above the fire, because I could tell that it was below our floors. If they were above the fire, how were they going to get past it in order to get downstairs? Or will anyone be able to come to help them in time before it got to be too, it got too intense?
How did you intend to put out the fire?
Well, that was the dilemma. We couldn't really put out the fire because the magnitude of it and the height. Normally, we would go up there with some hose and hook up to a standpipe, which runs water through the whole building, so you're able to put something out that high up. But being that there were damage with the plane crash, we couldn't even do that. So it was just a matter of really evacuating as much people as possible.
We saw people running for their lives, trying to get out of there. And we saw other people, firemen, policemen, running into the burning buildings, giving their lives to save others.
Well, I don't know exactly how many, but I know that every fireman that went there before any of the buildings came down was either running up the stairs or in the lobby on the way up the stairs or already being relieved or doing some sort of event that had to do with the stairs. Yes, they were all in there.
Okay, we were pretty relaxed coming down the stairs, and so because we didn't actually know what had hit, we didn't actually know it was a plane that had hit. So what happens, the way the Trade Center is made is that they have like the staircase unwinding. So you have some staircases that are re-entry staircases and some aren't. So we got down from 88, we got down to about the 78th floor, and there was a re-entry staircase, and we tried to open it. The managers tried to open it, but the door wouldn't open. There must have been debris behind the door. So the door wouldn't open, so the guys got together and they kicked the door, they banged, they did everything they could, it wouldn't open. And we kind of panicked then because we couldn't go any further down. That 78th floor, that was it. So what we had to do was the manager let us know, no, don't panic. We had to go back up from where we had just come from. We had to go back up several flights. And thank God we found it open. We found the door wasn't open, there was a door there. And they were able to get that door open. And from there, we proceeded down the stairs. And that's when we saw the firemen. They were all coming up. They were handing out water. They were giving some people oxygen. And the firemen, you could see that they were afraid, but with the job they had to keep going. But as we were going down, is that they were going up. And that's what kind of gets me, because I could still see some of the firemen's faces. Like at night, it's kind of hard to sleep.
Was there any hesitation for like not going inside the World Trade Center after you heard the news?
No, I didn't see any of that. We were going to do what we had to do. I mean, regardless of the situation, you still have to. There's a lot of people in there, so.
919, people trapped on 106th floor. A lot of smoke. Cannot see. Can't go up or down the stairs. Stairs have collapsed.
There was just like a lot of water coming down the staircase, but the lights never went out. That was the good thing about it. But just there were people on the staircase that were, they had people in wheelchairs, and it kind of made the walk down the staircase a little slower, because there was people in wheelchairs and people on walkers. Some people had very bad asthma. Like one of the secretaries that I work with on 88, she was having her breakfast at her desk that morning, and she didn't make it out because what happened was she was about 55 years old, and she was like a part-time worker. But what it was, she had panicked coming down on the staircase. And so she had to keep stopping, to get air. And we got down to I'd say about the 30th floor. And that's when the fireman had told us just to, go down and clear the building, that they had her. And that was it. We never saw her anymore. And my manager, Frank DiMartini, he actually got down all 88 flights with his wife. But the kind of person I know he is, but he went back to help other people. He never made it out.
All around, you could see the smoke, hear the sirens. Lower Manhattan has disappeared behind a veil of smoke. It looked like the whole city was in flames.
The sky was so hot that it seemed like the birds were on fire.
931, President Bush makes a brief statement promising that the United States will hunt down the terrorists.
There were people with different emotions. People were crying, people just walking, people were walking and talking. There were people who were talking about just nonsense, They're going here, they're going there, and I'm thinking, do you realize what just happened? Do you have any idea what just occurred? There were people who were talking about leaving the city.
936. Caller states they are stuck in elevator. States people are dying.
As we were coming down, we saw many firemen and police that were going up. And they kept telling us, just be careful, be patient, and go down as fast as you can, but as safe as you can. So I think they did a marvelous job, and I just feel for the ones that didn't make it.
This is what they do when we forget that to be a firefighter and to be a police officer means to put your life on the line for other people every day.
How do you feel about the job that the firefighters have been doing?
I think they've been doing an amazing job, and I think they are a true testament to what the city is. I think New York is filled with heroes, and they're just exemplary of that.
Thank you.
940, a third reported crash, this one at the Pentagon. It was a Boeing 757 American Flight 77, which took off from Dulles Airport near Washington and was bound for Los Angeles.
942, Mel caller states people still jumping off tower.
Seeing people jump to their deaths, one person after another and after another, that's the one thing that keeps them coming back in my mind.
One of the first known casualties was Father Michael Judge, the beloved fire department chaplain, who was killed by falling debris while administering last rites to a firefighter who had been struck by a body falling from the towers.
948, the West Wing of the White House is evacuated, and eventually state and justice offices as well as all federal office buildings. Vice President Cheney, his wife, and Laura Bush are hurried away to a bunker on White House grounds.
Once I got down all 88 flights, I got out the building safely, but I was like out of the building 5 minutes. We were clearing away from the building when we heard an explosion, and we all turned to look to see what happened. And we actually saw the building with our own eyes coming down.
At 10:02, Tower 2 fell. Thousands of people, including many of the rescuers, died as one floor pancaked into the next until it all came to rest in a 6-story heap.
It's coming down. Everybody out. Run, shouted a fireman. And you know what goes through your mind? Nothing goes through your mind. You do what you told. You run.
And everyone started to panic and they ran. And I also started to run too, but I got knocked down with the crowd. So from that I got 2 broken elbows and a broken ankle.
The first tower came down on top of us, but we were on another side of the building, so it was like an earthquake. It felt like an earthquake, and then we were buried in debris briefly, and couldn't breathe, and we had to put the mask on, and it was completely dark after that.
With all bridges and tunnels closed to traffic, people fled on foot. The Brooklyn Bridge afforded a terrifying view of the collapse of the South Tower.
And one guy came running down the street. He was screaming, screaming, screaming. And I just, even though I wasn't running and screaming, I could completely sympathize with how he felt, because that's just how he expressed himself. I don't know, maybe his wife was in the building, his sister, his dad, his mother, I don't know.
A fireman was yelling for everyone not to panic, but that was impossible because one of the tallest buildings in the world just collapsed right on top of you.
Tried to assess the situation. Everything was covered with debris. It was dark. Very few people around, so.
It was just dust covering everything. Dust, a lot of papers. Came all the way pretty much over the Brooklyn Bridge for miles. Just papers and dust.
The streets of Lower Manhattan were covered with white powder. Someone remarked that the dust blowing around us might well contain the ashes of thousands of victims.
When the debris started to smoke, the air started blowing in our eyes. It burnt my eyes. It gave me a fright in my lungs. And we waited for it to clear. It felt like an hour. It was probably about 3 minutes.
How many firefighters was down there when the South Tower collapsed?
When the South Tower collapsed, probably only about 200 or 300. When the North Tower came down, maybe about 1,000. And by the end of the day, probably 8,000.
After the South Tower fell, a fireman coming out of the North Tower said, "Where is the other tower?"
10:10, hijacked United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757 with 45 passengers on board en route to San Francisco from Newark, crashes in Somerset County, Pennsylvania.
1012, male caller states he can barely breathe, 105th floor.
Do you know anyone that was affected in the World Trade Center?
Yeah, I know some people. We actually had a guy who worked at Channel 7. He was an engineer, and, you know, the TV stations had towers on top of World Trade Center, so he was working that day, and unfortunately he was lost. And then just other people who had friends. And then, of course, covering the stories. It's very difficult, as you know, as a reporter, sometimes to meet and see all the people who have had such a terrible loss.
Did you know anyone affected in the World Trade Center accident?
Actually, a very dear high school buddy of mine was killed in the World Trade Center disaster. His name is Artie Simon, and we went to Tilden High School together in Brooklyn. And I haven't seen him for 30 years. And 2 weeks before the World Trade Center disaster, we had a reunion. And I saw him.
Thank you.
10:29 a.m. As if we were seeing a replay of what had already happened, the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. The destruction was total. It hadn't stopped at the last 30 floors or the last 10. There was only this shell. You couldn't believe your eyes. It was over. It was all gone. The devastation was complete.